Have you, I'm not sure your relationship or if he's still with us, but have you ever had this conversation with your dad and kind of has he heard about it or?
I lost my dad when I was 17, so we never
Okay.
got to make that connection. And it's funny because one of my favorite movies of all time was Field of Dreams. And that was the movie about, Kevin Costner played a character who lost his dad. And they had a strained relationship, which I did with my dad. And that last scene in the movie, which of course usually wipes out all the guys in the, because there's always something that all men share with this absence of some connection with their father.
Mm.
But when he wanted to play catch with his dad again, it was to me like getting a second chance to be able to reconcile the differences they had. That was a moving experience for me. And every time I see it, I still shed a tear about it because it's lost opportunity. But to your point, no, I did not get a chance to do that. I didn't get a chance to do it. But I do have two sons, and now I have a grandson, and I've tried to mend that sort of via my relationships with them. Both of them are highly sensitive. So
Do you think your dad, we're speculating, so however useful
yeah,
this question is, do you think he would have been one of those people that had he heard this concept was able to say, geez, I've been waiting to hear this my whole life because I've struggled with this?
he probably would.
Yeah.
I think he probably would. But you're looking at a guy from the World War II generation, and
Yeah.
so many. I saw so many, and have known so many World War II vets who came back from the horrors of war, and it all went down inside of them and never came back out. And it's very hard for them to express feelings of emotion, especially emotions they think are weak emotions, like not being able to deal with this, and suffering from PTSD. So I think he would have come around to that, but again, it would have been, had he not seen it, he probably would have finished the rest of his life still struggling with
Yeah.
the difference, right?
Well, let me hit another one that again, I understand is provocative and I'm not suggesting it is. I'm just curious about it. You mentioned the World War II generation, and that's a question I think about often because I totally agree with the idea of authenticity. And I think there's, even if they're not highly sensitive men, the idea of men feeling like they have more permission to just be who they are. And there's a
Yeah.
vulnerable side to that. There's an emotional side. There's a sensitive side is a good thing. But let's make it practical for a second. That World War II is an example. Somebody could look at that and say, if we had more highly sensitive men, if men tapped into this more, maybe we don't win that war. And I recognize as I say that, that's
Yeah.
triggering right off the bat. And I get it. Maybe it's a ridiculous statement, but maybe there's truth to it. Is there an ugly truth to that, that the idea of being able to go back to that word, suppress it? Because if you tap into that, you can't go to Germany and Normandy and storm the beach because it's just too horrific. And the
Right.
world is so ugly that sometimes we do need to put those blinders on and just go get shit done. I don't know. Is there anything to that? Is there any functionality at a societal level to that of us?
Well, I don't think because I'm advocating for the priestly caste, which is the highly sensitive people, that the warrior caste is not
So
worth, is
okay.
not valuable.
Okay.
And I'm trying to move away from the idea, because again, we're talking about the spectrum again. You're going to have people that are less impacted by, and I just can't imagine that anybody comes out of a war in combat without some impact. In many cases, it's horrific. But the idea is that who's going to be most impacted by that, right? And it's probably going to be the highly sensitive people are going to be the most. That doesn't mean they can't be warriors. That doesn't mean they can't go out and do it and suppress and do whatever. My dad, and other men that I've known that were World War II or Vietnam or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
It's the same thing. But here's the question I would ask. And maybe World War II isn't a good example because I don't think there was a choice there. I think we were attacked. It was obvious we had to respond. And this generation bravely did that. But how many wars could we have averted if we had not had the warrior mentality to begin with, right? How many wars since World War II were absolutely positively necessary? Or was it just gesturing of this sort of masculinity thing that we've got to go pound somebody in the dirt because we don't agree with something they did or whatever.
Great point.
Again, I'm not trying to say this war is necessary versus this war, but I think the idea of having a group such as the highly sensitive people, who we'll call the priestly group, the counselor group, would maybe help advise how to avoid getting into confrontations as the rate we're doing now. I mean, it's a smaller world. World War II, especially after they detonated the nuclear explosions, we entered into a different era. You can't have casual wars anymore and that go on. And we just recently finished up with a war that was gone on for 20 years. So I mean, it takes its toll. We need to find a better way of dealing with this stuff. I realize that's kind of pie in the sky, but I really think
True. Yeah.
that if we don't, we may not be around here.
Yeah. Well, I think you're hitting on a fundamental philosophical question around the nature of humanity in the world, because I think there's some people that would hear what you're saying and say, you're absolutely right. Like, you're absolutely right. If we had more highly sensitive people involved, or even just more people tapping into their sensitivity, that whole idea of needing to fight wars would go away, and there was so much to be saved there. There's another side of that which says the survival of the fittest, that's the natural law of the world, and you're always going to have these, for lack of a better phrase, strong men who are going to try and exploit and take more power and take more things. And if you don't match that, then you become the one that loses out. So you need to fight force with force. I think, I don't know if this is aspirational or pie in the sky, like you said. What I would like to believe is that that's more of a relic of that earlier age that we used to live in as humans, but we're evolving to a place where it doesn't have to be dog eat dog. It doesn't have to be survival of the fittest. We can find a way within that. But I don't know. It's a deeply philosophical question. If just innate in our human nature is that we're always going to be looking to take and exploit and gain power. And if that's the case, it's tough. Maybe war is inevitable in that regard.